Now here's a really common scenario us jazz guitar players often find ourselves in. Working on our soloing in the practice room, maybe working on playing over a backing track over those chord changes, and we're trying to follow them. And by the time we've got something together for one chord, the next chord or the subsequent chords keep hitting us like waves, and we just can't keep up. It can feel incredibly tough and it can feel incredibly frustrating. And today I want to share with you 5 tips that have really helped me with this particular problem to help you keep the pace with the chord changes. Number 1 is to isolate, and that is to say that to be working on how to solo over a tune, you don't need to be working with the whole full form of the tune. That's our end result, where we want to get to. At the minute I'm working on Afternoon in Paris, which has the following chords. You could work on like one section, an A section, or the B section, say, or even sometimes just 4 bars. And I even narrow it down sometimes to just like 2 chords, maybe a difficult change to play or one that I'm not so familiar with, and I'll just work at that. Get used to the surroundings before moving on, and then the whole thing can come together when you're ready for it. To begin with, I might even isolate down just to playing over the first 2 chords, the first change effectively. So I might look for the arpeggios. Maybe there's C major 7 followed by C minor 7, or scales, C major scale, C minor scale. And find the important notes, which is always the 3rd. Be an E for the C major 7, going to an E flat for the C minor 7. So my lines might try to pick up on that because it's a change from major to minor. All that stuff, I'll try and work out ideas to play just over that little bit. So 1. And it's all just that, just trying to play over that. Number 2, the most common piece of advice I probably give out is to slow down. You don't even have to play in time. You can play in free time while you get your head around chord changes. And the problem with a backing track, whoever created it, it's just at that one speed. And that might not be the right speed for you. That might be too quick, it might be too slow. Often they're too quick, maybe to play the melody even, or to try and solo across and keep pace with those changes. This is where I think the app iReal Pro does have a use. This isn't sponsored in any way, it's an app I just happen to use and many other practicing jazz musicians use. It has its pitfalls, but one of its good things is you can look up a track and it creates a MIDI based backing track, but you can dial in any speed you want. So if you want to do a much slower tempo, you can, and that means it's helpful for the different stages you're at with a standard. But this problem of not being able to keep up with all the changes are happening and my head can't keep up with all of that, I can't solo over it, I can't create ideas over it because it's just too much. For me, that comes down to not having internalized the sound of the harmony and the chord changes itself. So I would do something like this. So going back to An Afternoon in Paris, I might just play the chords very slowly, maybe even arpeggiating them. Don't have to worry about playing in time. Just listening to where the harmony's leading us and where it resolves. And I'll keep things incredibly slow and just work on finding the harmony, whether through scales or arpeggios. Like 1, 2, 3, 4. You can hear the chord changes there going through that. Obviously it would depend on what level your scales and arpeggios and ability to craft ideas, but that's just working incredibly slowly, so I've got time to keep up with the chord changes. Number 3 is when you're trying to solo over chord changes, don't get too bogged down intellectually. Don't overthink it. My second point of slowing down and playing out of time is where you do have the time to think about things and explore harmonic concepts. And in reference to Afternoon in Paris, the tune I'm working on myself at the minute, that first section's got loads of chords, it's got 10 chords or so. So if I did something like a scale-based kind of approach and try to, get a scale for each chord, look how many notes I might end up with. 2, 3, 4. Something like that. The same could be said with arpeggios. Now, I'm not saying those things aren't worthwhile exploring, but your long-term aim has to be to extrapolate, to extract from those harmonic ways of framing jazz harmony a melody. Now, melodies can obviously be complex, they can be simple too. And for me, what's wrong with a really simple melody that cuts through that harmony, or a motif which repeats? You can make your melodies as complicated or as simple as you want. Personally, I'm more inspired by melodic players, players that play with the melody of the song as the first kind of entry into improv, and people that say something that's maybe memorable rather than constant streams of notes. But that's all subjective and it's all a matter of taste. A motif that might work across the changes 1, 2, 3, 4. There you go, that's super melodic, might get a bit repetitive after a while, but it's a much easier way to try and get through the harmony. Number 4 might seem like a contradiction into the theme of this video, how to keep up with the pace of chords, and I use the analogy of like getting hit by waves. These chords, they keep coming at us. But if you're on the beach and you're watching surfers, they don't go for every wave. Obviously, they select carefully what to go for from experience, and I think experienced improvisers do this too. And by that I mean you don't have to hit each chord. Sometimes it might make sense to prioritize certain chords over others. When I'm playing over the changes to a standard, sometimes I skip over certain chords and prioritize others. So Afternoon in Paris, here in 2 bars. Bar the 1 chord, C major 7, then we get a 2-5 in the key of B flat major, C minor 7 to F7. You could do one or two things here. Either could just ignore the 2 chord, ignore the C minor 7, or ignore the F7. Those 2 chords are so interlinked, you can afford to do this. And not always you want to do it, but it's something you can do. I'm just going to think C major 7 into F7, 1, 2, 3, 4. Or 1, 2, 3, 4. Or maybe just C major 7 into C minor, 1, 2, 3, 4. This is opposed to thinking of both chords, something like 1, 2, 3, 4. Which, kind of, can be done obviously, but it's more to think about, more knowledge of cramming harmony into quick spaces, short spaces I should say. Number 5, my final point today, is to practice a standard for longer than you think you need to. Working with a tune for a long period of time means you really get to grips with the harmony of the tune, which means you can more easily create melodies over the top and more easily keep up with the chord changes. Going back to Afternoon in Paris, the one I'm working on at the minute. How well do I know that melody? I can hum it, I can sing it, I can think about it in my head and know what it sounds like. I can play it on the guitar in a couple different positions. I can hear those chord changes in my head because I've internalized them, because I've practiced them for long enough to be really, really familiar with them. It takes time. It will depend what stage you're at in your journey of jazz guitar. So please be realistic. Also, please be kind to yourself as well. Picking the right repertoire to work on is also very important here. Not picking something with too many unfamiliar things. I think with each new jazz standard you learn, you might want something a little bit unfamiliar, but some things you can recognise you've done in other tunes, right? If you've got any tips that can help with this particular problem, then definitely leave them, share them with others in the comments. Check out my video, I'll put it on the screen, on portioning the changes. Jazz guitar lessons every Wednesday and Saturdays. Thank you so much for tuning in. Hit that like button, leave me a comment if you're new here. Please consider subscribing. Until next time, you take care.